Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Soft Landing Podcast, a gentle space for self-discovery. We're your hosts,
Rafaella
and Eric. It's just the two of us this week, and we are talking about what it means to have an A1 day one and unpacking friendships. So, to start us off for this week's Eric's Inquiry, who was your first bestie, and what did they mean to you?
My first bestie. Wow. Her name was Tasha, and she lived across the street from me. I don't think that was my first bestie. I think that was maybe my first good friend. But we were so young that, after one season, like after, going to the next grade or something like that, or I think maybe she moved or whatever, we weren't old enough to keep in contact or anything. It was probably like first grade. But I remember that was the person I hung out with because she lived across the street. We kind of liked the same things. Wow. What is my relationship with friends?
We'll talk about it more, I guess. But I think it definitely speaks to like the convenience of friends growing up at first, right? I know for me, the person that I think of is D. And so he, funny enough, did not live near me at all. He lived in Miami where I was born but not raised, and so we would go over the summers to stay with our grandma pretty often. And he was the son of one of her neighbors, Miss Joanne. And so whenever I was visiting, we would be hanging out, doing whatever kids do, spending the day together, running around, what have you, playing video games. And I even remember they moved at some point somewhere else in Miami, and so like I remember after that happened, we would like make a point to like get over to them so I could spend the day with him, or he'd come over to my grandma's and spend the day with me while we were visiting. And so that was definitely like someone who, again, right, like conveniently in the same kind of location, has some common interests, and we just had that connection. That also at some point they, I think, moved again or something like that, and I don't know where they are now. My grandmother, I think, took better tabs on a lot of people, so she knew at some points. But I definitely remember him kind of being that person that I knew when I went to my grandma's, I would be spending a lot of time with him outside of like just me and my sister.
Yeah. I feel like my memory of having best friends doesn't really start until junior high, middle school. I think before that, it was just a lot of trying to figure out who your friends are or what groups you feel like you might want to be part of. And then just like, I don't know, for me, I'm just reflecting on that. And I'm just like, there were a lot of people I did not enjoy hanging with. I didn't like them as people, but either because of vicinity or convenience, or this is just the people to be around, I guess. But I just remember really not being impressed and interested in a lot of these people because they usually kept a lot of drama going, just things I wasn't really into. But it's just like, all right, I'm bored. And then also when I was younger, I was a tomboy, so I usually spent a lot of time playing games and playing, kickball, just running around, just being that type of kid.
Yes.
I'm running around and playing games type of stuff. And I didn't really need a best friend for that. I just needed like 5 people so we could play a game. But in middle school is when really started developing friendships where we would call each other and try to do things together after school, which was different than your neighborhood friends, right? Like you said, someone has to bring you here.
Yes.
Versus the neighborhood people is like, we just go to your house. That's really easy.
Yes.
But I remember that really started happening, and I'm having a flashback of having a diary journal type of thing that we would pass between like 3 friends. And I was just talking about this with someone, but we even created like our own alphabet, even though the key was in the journal. It was like in the back of the journal somewhere. But I could just picture it. I had different Mead notebooks with different friend groups, and we would just pass it along in between periods, and we would just fill each other in.
That's a lot of trust.
I know, right? Because it could get, I'm pretty sure there were times where either an adult found it or a person outside of the group found it, but I don't have any strong memories about what happened, so
Right.
maybe it didn't happen. But I do remember that, like, trying to guard it, like, no. But it was also just a notebook. So who's going to just take a notebook? So I don't know. I'm just having flashback images of some of this stuff.
Wow.
And, yeah. First bestie.
Well, I'm glad we got to take that little stroll down memory lane. And so I think this also can segue into kind of my next question, right? It was like, what even is then the significance of friendships? Like, what role do they play in our lives? You know, I think for me, when I think of like the meaningful relationships in my life up to this point, so many of them have been friendships, right? I value platonic love heavily. Honestly, to a certain degree, probably more than romantic love. And so for me, you know, I see friendships as really being a space of discovery for myself, an opportunity to create a safe space to feel affirmed as I'm trying to figure out who I am. And oftentimes, honestly, my friendships have also been in ways some type of model or some type of image of what it is I'm trying to be as well, right? So like I remember looking to certain friends and being like, wow, like how comfortable they are in their sexuality or their gender, being able to have conversations with them, being able to talk to them, being able to have these conversations that for me allowed a different part of me to be explored that I wouldn't necessarily be able to feel comfortable with per se like family, right? And so for me it was this opportunity of just deeper connection that I was able to have in my life. And I don't know if that's like because I had that first, that's why like I value it so much or not, but it has meant a lot to me. It's also been a source of support, right? Like I think I shared before the wild stuff that happened to me when I got hurt and, you know, the Peace Corps and stuff. And, you know, the friends who were checking up on me, who were around at the time when I was like going through it, who just happened to also be in that area, the ones who were like checking up on me as it was happening, the ones who, when I got back to the U.S., who were close to me, came and visited me, you know, just that source of support that I've had that that really speaks to the chosen family that I'm able to build with them, right? And so yeah, so I think for me it really does mean so much that I have these people in my lives to turn to.
Yeah, for me, I feel similarly regarding this opportunity to have a community or a space to talk about stuff that generally did not talk about with my family. So I feel like my friends knew everything.
Yeah.
Like the good, bad, ugly, trauma stuff, you know, things that took me years to share with my family, or maybe even to this day I haven't shared. And so being able to have that has always felt really good, in addition to having friends who maybe had similar backgrounds where we could just have some acknowledgement about how messed up it was to go through that or have that early lived experience. And now I feel so grateful for the friendships that I have, that they are so supportive and they constantly challenge me, even though they may not be challenging me like on their own, but I take it as a personal challenge for me to get into my stretch zone, because so much of my personality and my identity, especially when it comes to being a trauma survivor, has been to be very independent and not rely or depend on people because of disappointment, and they can't do it right, or, you know, all these different messages that we tell ourselves. And in doing my own work, being able to experience and explore vulnerability within friendships, to even say, all right, y'all, this is what I'm working on in therapy. It's asking for help. Or if I'm feeling strong emotions or I'm feeling lonely and I don't want to be alone or something, like I'm going to push myself to do it. I remember this example vividly when I had a real tough therapy session, and afterwards I was just sitting in my room in my bed, and I was just feeling all of the emotions. And I had a text, and I was texting to my friends, and I was typing it, deleting it, typing it, deleting it, because I'm like, man, this is some weak ass shit, yo. Don't text anybody this. This is crazy. Like, why would you,
Yeah.
just going back and forth in my mind. And then finally, I decided on something really simple. Because at first it was just like, I had a therapy session, and this and this and this came up, and I just don't want to be alone, blah, blah, blah. And I just was like, yo, I want to watch a movie. And then I shared, when we got together, I shared a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because evidence. Don't want to leave it in the text
Right.
message. It's another trauma thing, y'all. Will maybe get into it.
Yeah.
But just being able to see my own growth in the way that I envisioned community for myself. So anyone who listens to me or knows me, like, I really value community. I feel like we should not be alone. We should have someone.
Absolutely.
But also in my head, it's like, I don't need anybody. I can be community for everyone else. But Rafaella will not come to you to ask you for anything. So I saw the hypocrisy in that. I saw the trauma in that. I saw, how I didn't want to have that type of community where there was an imbalance, where, I couldn't or wouldn't go to folks for support. And also, if I have this narrative that no one can help me or they won't help me, I just won't know if that's true. And I don't want to believe that of my friends that I'm choosing to have loving relationships with. And so I really had to put myself out there to do the hard thing, say the hard thing, and then see what happened. And they always showed up, and I also know that if they couldn't, it would have been fine, because it wouldn't have been from a place of like, this is a one-sided relationship. It would have been like, I don't have the capacity or spoons, which I completely respect. So over the years, my relationship for friendships has definitely grown, and I think that's pretty organic as well. Like, when you're younger, it's more, who do I get along with? Who do I party with? And, you may have spurts of vulnerability, but as we get older, for me, it has just changed so much because of my own work and just noticing the limitations I was putting around myself and around my relationships. And so I just love that ability in relationships in general, but especially with friendships. How can we expand? How can we learn more about ourselves through the way that we're in relationships with our friends?
I love that. I love the piece of, like, limitations to expansion, right? I think that also speaks to me of how I do see friendships, right? I want it to be something that's more expansive. I want it to be something that carries the weight that it deserves, right? And I think that oftentimes we're told, friendships are nice, but they're not the focal point.
Yeah.
They're not the end all be all. You're supposed to have your family, and then you're supposed to get married and start your own family, and those are the focus things. And, for me, and I think because of the queerness, because of the transness that's inherent, it opens up the possibilities for something different. And so I just also then want that for other people too, to not feel like
boxed in by having this hierarchy on relationships. I think that's really important too.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be that way.
And then life is has a lot more richness to it when it's not, when we can experience love from a variety of sources and care and concern, and I think that's really, really important. But we have and society has gotten away from that, where it's just a prioritization on your partner and your biological family, I guess, or the people who raise you or that you were raised with, and not necessarily in your friendships. And people do suffer. People get married or in their long-term committed relationships, and then their friendships start to fade for some reason, and then they feel alone, or maybe one partner has a lot of friends and the other doesn't. And so, that dynamic can be really interesting when you're in a relationship, in a romantic relationship. So what would it mean to look like what would it mean and look like if we were really intentional about teaching folks that all of our relationships are important, that there isn't this hierarchy in the way that friendships are minimized once you become partnered. Yeah, and you can still care for one another. Thinking about, like, I remember reading this article a while ago that was talking about, you know, if you're married, you should get rid of your unmarried friends or something like that. And I was like, this is so extreme. You know, it's just sentiment. Like, you don't have anything to relate about, or they can't relate to you, and vice versa. But also, if we're saying that relationships are there to expand us, to help us grow, why wouldn't we want a circle that is diverse in relationship status and age and, you know, interest and work and where you're from, like all of these different things that can just help us increase our understanding of the world and the different people in it. So I found that article really interesting. But, you know, that speaks to a whole other piece.
It does. Yeah, for sure.
So since we're talking about it then, I guess, how do you see romantic and familiar relationships as different?
Yeah. I think for me, it kind of is like they might be feeding different things, right? Different relationships can address different parts of ourselves, right? So I think romantic, you know, that need or that desire for partnership, I think is a big thing for a lot of people, in terms of like this person who wants you, who desires you, who loves you in this way. There's also potentially that sexual component to it.
So I think that's interesting. Hold on for a second. So a person who wants you and desires and this sexual component. So are you saying desire you in a non-sexual way, or did you mean desire in a sexual way and wanting you in a sexual way? Because I desire to be with my friends, right, and to go do things with them. I want to be around them. So this language of desire and wanting,
that's very true.
That can be erotic and sensual and sexual, and it cannot be.
Yes. I think typically people associate with a more sexual connotation for romantic partnerships. And I think that typically people, it's kind of like, this is your person, which I also, or your soulmate, which I'm also like, oh, I don't know about that.
You don't believe in soulmates?
I don't know. That's a lot of responsibility to put on a person, for one. And two, I don't, that's, no. We're not going to go down that road. But anyways, yeah, and so I think when it comes to like romantic partnerships, it's, you know, it's so, I'm like, it's like usually someone who you might live with, you know, but all these things you can do with other people, right?
I
like
mean, we live with our family.
Yeah, we live with our family. We can live with friends, and, you know, all these things, and so
you can live with people who aren't friends either.
Yeah,
we just sharing a space.
Exactly.
You paying your rent on time?
Yeah,
cool.
But it's like this, like the tension behind it, right? Is that this is something that you're building towards a life together, right? With this typically one specific person, in particular monogamous mindset. Maybe poly, we'll see how that, you know, shakes up if there's more people involved in that. But yeah.
I think also something that's coming up for me is this saying that I've heard a lot in my community is parents saying, "I'm not one of your little friends." But now I'm thinking about it in a different way. Not that I haven't had this conversation around like what exactly does it mean to be your kid's friend,
right?
And for a kid to find friendship within their parent or caregiver, what is the harm in being a friend? Because I'm thinking about having friends who hold me accountable, who tell me how it is, who support me, who love me, who show up when I need them, who are honest and transparent. Is that not what we want in a parent or caregiver? So what is this idea of friend, which, I mean, okay, a little bit, I kind of know the answer.
Yes.
About like, you know, friends who are just partying and, you know, that's who you kiki with and all this other stuff that parents are like, no, I'm not that.
Right.
I'm here to discipline you. I'm here to set you on the right path. But I think maybe that's how we kind of get into these predicaments with what a friend is supposed to be. If it's not someone that we're looking for support and guidance and challenging and growth from.
Right.
If we're just like, we only link up to bar hop or go on vacation, which nothing wrong with all of that. But it's just like, but how does that shape our definition and experience of friends then if it's if we don't have friends in our family? And then in our partners.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of folks, I'm like, y'all, you know, people will break up, we should stay friends. I'm like, you are not friends.
Right.
You don't, if you.
No, you're right. And, you know, and even we say, like, date your friend or, you know, or.
What do you want in a partner? Like someone I can be a friend
with? Or like the basis of a good relationship is friendship, right? Like all these things. But then we don't do that the flip side with friendships, right? We don't say date your friends. We don't say, you know, be tender with your friends. We don't say have sex with your friends, which we'll talk about that later. But so what is a friend? What does it mean to be a friend and to have a friend? Let's look it up. Okay. We're in our look up era.
I know.
We've been looking up a lot of things.
Okay, friend definition. All right, so according to Oxford Languages Dictionary, a person whom one knows and with whom one has a bond of mutual affection, typically exclusive of sexual or family relations. Okay, so that's what Oxford had to say about a friend. Mutual affection.
Right.
A bond of mutual affection. And, you know, affection is just that feeling of caring, right? Liking someone, something, right? An affection towards.
Yeah.
Pretty basic definition that
Very
I don't really think
general.
gets us to what we're really talking about and the way that we experience friendships and the way that I think a lot of us desire to experience friendships, especially when we're talking about heartbreak within relationships, within our friendships.
Yeah.
That can
be a lot.
That can be a lot. Sometimes more impactful than a romantic breakup or going no contact with family. So I don't think that definition does it justice when we're really trying to get an understanding of what a friend is.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how about we take a break here and come back and try and tease this out a bit more.
All right.
Okay. We'll be back in a moment, y'all. All right, y'all, and we're back. So, you know, we're trying to figure out this thing around friendship, right? So maybe let's take a step back and talk about how do we even begin to build a friendship?
$1 million question. And I hear it more.
Yes.
The older that I get. Because so much of the way that we make friends are typically kind of we're in an environment where it's supposed to happen. Like we're in school, we have these groups and we're supposed to find our people. But then as you get older and you move away from home, you start new jobs. It's like, where do you go to meet people? How do you make a friend when you're 38 and you just moved to a new city? Yeah.
Absolutely.
And everyone already has their families. They have their A1 day ones.
Right.
From, you know, especially if they're from the place that you are moving to.
Yeah.
So how do we build friendships?
Listen, you know, just like as a side note, one thing that came to mind in terms of like these built-in things, when I was in the Peace Corps, we would call each other GIFs, government issued friends.
That's like why people have kids. Why they don't want to single, what is it called? Only child. It's like supposed to be your built-in
built-in friend. Yeah, absolutely.
What is that called? A biff?
A biff, built-in friend. Oh man, but yeah, it is such a difficult question, right? And you're right. I think as we get older, as we move away from making that friend across the street or the neighborhood or that lives next door to your grandmother, it becomes so much more difficult to do that. And I think one thing that I think about too, as we're like getting back to this piece of like the difference between like romantic relationships and friendships, I feel like oftentimes, particularly at this point, like when we are older, it can feel like dating a bit, right? It can feel like that process of trying to find a romantic partner, of also trying to find a platonic friend. And what I mean by that is often it's like, how are we putting ourselves out there, right? Like, are we trying out new hobbies, maybe going to a cooking class and trying to strike up conversations? Are we going to like a friend speed dating thing, right? But
that's, I mean, you know, I think a lot of it is about the vulnerability of putting yourself out there.
Yes.
And all the feelings and thoughts that come up with it, because it feels like you should already have it. You know, and so what does it mean about me that I don't have any friends, or that I struggle to make friends, or I don't know where to go to start, or that I'm an introvert, so I'm not going to a cooking class, or I'm, you know, these type of things. Or if I do go, I'm going to keep to myself. I know when I was abroad for a while, a couple years ago, I was like, all right, so I'm going to be in this place for 6 months or 1 month or whatever the case is. How am I going to meet people?
Right.
And I decided I was just going to go to, what did I go to? Like language exchange groups. And I met the dopest people. Nice. You know, I met people from Romania who were visiting for whatever time, and Italy and the U.S. and other Spanish-speaking countries. And next thing you know, I'm getting invited to people's birthday parties, you know, getting in for free. I was like, I'm trying to pay. And they're like, oh, everything is paid for. I'm like, what? I don't even know this person. But I was welcomed into it, into the space. Still have connections with those people to this day. But that was a choice that I actively made to get out there and mix and mingle, to build a community. Because I could have I could have just gone on all the excursions myself, or just which, I mean, whatever your goals are,
yes,
those are your goals. But if your goal is to build friendships and relationships in new places, this is why I'm saying these ideas. I'm thinking of this one time, this was here in St. Louis, and I had met some folks, and we were going to go bowling.
Right.
So I get there, and then I start looking at my messages, and people are canceling. But I'm already out, and I'm cute.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I want to be out. And so I was sitting there, and I'm like, oh, gosh, all my friends, no one else is coming.
Wow.
And so I saw this table of people, and they were kikiing, having a good time. And I just decided, I'm like, this is really bold of me.
Yes.
But I went up to them, and I said, hey, all my friends canceled on me. Can I hang out with y'all?
I love that.
And they were like, sure. And so we had a good time.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to be out.
Yeah.
And, you know, so not that lasted anything, but we follow each other on social media.
Right.
But, you know, so getting out there, pushing a little bit into your outside of your comfort zone, if that's what you're saying that you want. If you want different things, you have to do things differently.
Absolutely.
And as we get older, it just becomes a little bit more difficult, just because usually we're tired. We have limited energy and time and other resources, and we can really get into a pattern of going to work and coming home, going to work and coming home.
Absolutely.
And so we have to find those places to switch up that routine. And even if that means something that you do once a week, or you find some type of group that has a weekly or monthly meetup, just start getting out there. But I just want to say that a lot of people have this question about making friendships as they get older. So a lot of us are wanting this. It's not just you, but we are terrified. So
it's scary.
How can we normalize it?
Yeah.
so that way we can start making those changes that we need to build those relationships that we want throughout our lifespan.
Because if you're wanting that, chances are there's also a lot of other people, right, that are also wanting it.
Right.
So how do we just put ourselves in these spaces and places to start to build these connections? Because also it's like proximity, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like the more we're hanging out with people, the more we get to know them, the more we are like, you're cool, you're dope, I want to know you more. And then we can start to build some of those blocks of relationships with them.
And being authentic, because I think also something that I've been hearing is folks being fearful or apprehensive due to feeling that it's going to be more transactional, right? Like, oh, is this a networking thing? Are you trying to, seriously, like, are you trying to connect with me to sell me something or, get something from me versus really building a friendship? Yeah. And that's serious too. So also being mindful of the type of spaces that you're in to build these relationships. Like if it is a social networking thing, then it might be a little different. You want to build some authentic relationships for business purposes, but it's not going to be the same as a friendship on the surface level. It could definitely shift into that, but just be mindful of what is the different energy and intention of a, BYOB mixer versus a painting in the park type of thing. So
I love that.
So I think that's about setting that intention though, because we don't get what we want by not pursuing it and trying to get. Maybe in some situations, if you have like somebody deliver something to your house, be like, hey, I think we would hit it off. They literally came to you. But
even then,
can't wait for that.
You putting yourself out
there.
Yeah,
you have to order. Have to answer the door.
Yeah.
Don't leave it.
So when I was like kind of looking into stuff around this episode, this topic, it was there. So one piece was definitely like that piece around putting yourself out there, I think is so big, but then also so difficult for people. And one thing they were talking about was for the people who recognize, hey, I have to make an effort. I have to like go out of my way to do this versus the people who were thinking, oh, this should just come to me, right? Yeah. The ones who thought, oh, this should just come to me were much lonelier 5 years later as opposed to the ones who made the effort.
Can see that in relationships in general. Right. Folks who wanting to date or not putting themselves out there.
Yeah. And so, I think it speaks to that there's also some stuff around introvert stuff that was kind of wild, if I'm being honest. At least the stuff that I found, I was like, that's intense. They're like, just change who you are.
Oh.
But
which there's spaces for, folks who are more introverted. And we just have to find those spaces. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it should be pretend to be an extrovert. Like, no, that's not the answer. That's not sustainable. We can't keep that up.
And one thing that I thought too is like on the flip side with extroverts, I feel like as someone who tends to be more extroverted, although I do identify as ambivert because we all I think have the capacity for both. But on the flip side, if you're like so extroverted that you're like attracting a bunch of different people, what's the quality behind that too? I think that's something that is also really important in this, is not just finding a friend to have a friend, but finding a friend that is a quality friend to you and you're one to them.
Yeah. I think when we're talking about those intentions, it's like really thinking about what it is you want in a friend. Not only what type of things you want to do, how do you want to feel? Yeah. What's your capacity to also be a friend? So I think all the time we're looking at what we want and not necessarily our capacity. Like, are we ready for the thing that we want? And then also, can we show up for that person? Be it family dynamics we're trying to shift, friendships, romantic, whatever the case is. Are we in a place? And not to say that you shouldn't pursue those things, but you should be intentional about whatever work it is that you need to do during that thing, right? Or during the pursuit of this friendship or relationship or whatever the case is. Just knowing that that's going to make it healthier for everybody involved all around. But, we actually have a blog on the Healing Exchange website.
We do.
It's all about manifesting friends. And so we do talk about setting intentions, writing affirmations, having goals, right? And again, I think it comes back to this aversion to work. When it comes to relationships, we just feel like it should just be natural. And
I swear.
But what comes to you easy that's always worth it? Is that a saying or am I making this up? There's a saying.
There's a song.
Like it's a song.
You know, I always have a song. There's definitely a song about that
okay.
with that line in it, for sure. I think it's like Selena Gomez or something.
Okay. Well, speaking of, she had a friend who gave a kidney.
And then they are no longer friends.
Yeah. But there's life.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful gift.
Exactly. Yeah. For sure.
Anyway, that's a little sidebar.
But to the like the work and the effort piece, I do agree. I think that in all of our relationships, whether they be friendships or romantic or even family, I think that people just think, well, it's there. And so, like, the fact that that person exists in my life in this role should be enough. Like, everything else should be figured out, right? Like, it should all just flow in the way that it's supposed to. And that, to me, is really baffling because, it's like being on autopilot. But not actually a good autopilot, right?
Yeah.
Which there's like self-driving cars now. but like.
But what is like the effort you're actually putting into it? Yeah.
Yeah, because if again, like that piece around what is your capacity, if you're not giving what needs to be given, in the words of Law Roach, then why would someone stick around?
Yeah, and also, can you have conversation about that? Because I think we can recognize that folks may go through different periods in their life due to a variety of reasons, health, finances, mental wellness, that may make them tired, or they don't have, just the spoons. But how do you just be upfront about that and say, this is what I have going on, so at least someone isn't on their side wondering, like, am I being ignored? Are they ghosting me? Are we still friends? When it's just like, okay, I know they're going through some stuff, and this is the capacity I have to show up with them and for them, instead of just like this unknown thing happening. I even had some of my own moments like that, and I remember when I was abroad for a while, I was missing a friend, and our lives just kind of went separate ways. Like, not only did I move, but they had a kid, and just, different things in life. And so I remember just reaching out, just asking what they were interested in. And I shared what I wanted, but I was also being open to, like, if we've grown apart, then yeah, I can accept that and I respect that. But if not, I would love for us to rekindle our friendship. And, I think we're still working on it. This was like a really good conversation, though, that we were able to have. And I also learned about some feelings that they had about our friendship and some narratives that they had formed, and, that kind of prevented them from reaching out, that we were able to challenge and dismiss and or whatever. Yeah. But now we both know that everything's good and we're busy.
Yeah.
But we can always pick up like we never left. Right. And that feels good. While also knowing I would love to, there's several people I'm like, would love to talk to you more, but I also struggle with this. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's just, you kind of get caught up, and then next thing you know. So sometimes I'll send a message like, listen, I know it's like 11 o'clock at night, but if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget tomorrow. So respond when you can. Thinking about you. Here's what's going on with me. Talk soon, Yeah. Because if I don't do it in that moment, I'm going to tell myself, it's too late. I'm going to text him tomorrow. Yeah. And I won't. So I try to remember that about myself, and my friends know that it's all love. Right.
Yeah, I hear you. So my first thought is, for sure, I think I am someone who is very much so a in the moment type of person, right? Like, literally in my vicinity of awareness, that's where most of my concentration goes. I think that's a lot of people, right? It's like what is in front of us is what we tend to focus on, and the things that aren't can kind of go to the back of our minds a little bit. And I think that it's especially true when we think about certain friendships where, either from childhood or from, previous work, positions or places, or even undergraduate experiences or graduate experiences, people tend to then move elsewhere, right? And it can be so difficult to keep track of people, to keep up with them, to kind of nurture and cultivate that relationship as it's also changing, right? Like you said,
and the people in it are changing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you went abroad. This friend had a child. Like those are big life things that are occurring that can make it really difficult to still maintain those connections. Yeah. And so I think that, for me, I'm also thinking about people who I definitely am like, I want to be better about keeping up with you. Just recently, I have same thought of like, I have this person in my head, a friend of mine who I've been meaning to catch up with, been meaning to text them, check in with them. And the other day, literally, I was grabbing my phone and it just so circumstance. Maybe this is like when it does kind of just happen a little bit, that serendipitous moment of my finger hitting their name and calling them by accident. And then picking up like, oh my God, hi friend. And we were able to just catch up, and that was really lovely. And I have other friends who I'm like working to try and schedule time with them to do calls. I have another friend, I have been thinking about them months. I'm like, I need to get up with them. I need to get up with them. Like, maybe after this episode, I will be like, finally do it, because it's been a while since we've checked in and I truly don't know what's going on with them. Yeah. And yeah, so I think that also speaks to that additional piece of effort of when things are changing, how do we check in with those friendships to make sure that there's still something that we want them to be, right? They might not be able to look the same, but they can still serve a certain purpose for us. And I think that is something that a lot of people also struggle with, because we want to be able to have people with us in the moment, but then we also have these really beautiful connections with people who aren't around us daily that we still want to have. And so how do we be intentional? How do we cultivate them in a way that, I have friends. I mean, one time, the last time I was in DC, literally showed up to the bar they're working out to do karaoke. And then after I was like, oh, by the way, I don't have a place to stay tonight because I was in Baltimore for a conference. So I took the train over. So they're like, you can stay with us. So what does it look like to cultivate those type of relationships? To be able to then have that care in those moments.
I want to just go back to my belief that we just have to do the things in the moment. Like when you have the thought, just send the message. Just send the message, because
can I do it right now?
Do it right now.
All right. I am literally right now going to text this friend and just be like, hey, I miss you. Let's catch up.
Because, if we both are talking about just being easily distracted, we have a lot going on, and we have to just do the thing, because we may not remember and we may not have later.
Yeah. That is definitely a really good point. Yeah.
Sometimes we just want to touch base. I think sometimes for me, it's like, I just want you to know that I'm rooting for you. I see you. Sometimes I don't want to have a whole conversation. But I just want you to know I'm here.
Right.
Okay?
And I'm thinking of you.
Yeah. Like it. And just keep going on about your day.
Yeah. No, that's real. Because that's like maybe what you have the capacity for too, right? Yeah.
But this message of how much work and effort that it takes to maintain friends and friendships, I think, can be hard for us, just because, again, we're taught to put that energy and care into our romantic connections and mending things with our family. But we absolutely need to do that with our friends, because we're not going to always be happy-go-lucky and see the eye to eye and things happen. But are we able to say, like, I was really hurt when this happened, I would like to talk to you about it? Or do we just talk to our other friend, like, can you believe that? And I'm not talking to them anymore. And, which is a common response. I know so many people who I'm like, well, what happened? I don't even remember, but we are not friends anymore. I'm like, so you don't even remember what it was, and you've ended this 15-year relationship or something like that. So this message of who gets your energy and who should you put effort and intentionality to. I mean, listen, we have how many type of therapists and classes and books about strengthening your romantic relationship and fixing your marriage and healing your parent wounds and all this other stuff. How many people are out here specializing in or offering resources for mending and sustaining friendships?
back to the blog, I think that was like the first thing that I did with you was write a whole blog post about like friendship therapy. Because again, if this is something that I value so much, if we do get to a place of conflict or even just like wanting to go in to nurture, like seeing it as a place of nurturing that relationship, why not be able to see like a therapeutic space be something of value for a friendship, right? If we're thinking of these people who, are super close to us, who we consider our chosen family, who we have invested this time in, if we feel like there's a need for it, why shouldn't we pursue that? Because again, right, if we're looking at it as not a hierarchy of relationships, that needs that attention the same way we would go to a couples therapy or family therapy.
I don't know if this is something I need to say in here, but you've said it twice, and you've said it before about chosen family.
Yeah.
And I'm just really curious about what that means, instead of just calling someone family.
Got it. Oh. Yeah, I think for me and how I've come to see it, right, is that oftentimes, we'll think about family of origin. These are typically people that were born, into, and they are typically people who might call our parents.
I know that. So I know that piece. But I'm thinking of like, sometimes I'm sure you probably have examples, or folks like this who will call their friends sisters and brothers.
Right. And
you have an auntie who is not a blood aunt, and maybe this is just more so in like the queer community.
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up, even with my good friends, like someone would call my aunt, or I would call them mom, stuff like that. And we have our really good friends, but it's just like, if this is my family, I'm calling them family, not chosen family. So maybe it just goes back to just the queer community with, experiencing the trauma and the distancing and the, being kicked out, all this other stuff where we have chosen family now. But I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Just because we're talking about friendships and relationships. I'm like, why not just family instead of chosen family? Or is it to signify this? I don't know. You want it to stand out that this is not my biological family?
Right. And
but I also think that's interesting too.
I think that was where I was going to, is like, it's this active choice of choosing who your family is, and being able to say that. I think for me personally too, I know my family feels some type of way when I mentioned like friends as the sense of like chosen family, which that's a whole nother.
They would rather you just call them family, or they just don't want them to be. This is my Eric.
Yeah, they're like, family who? How?
They are akin to us.
And something that is like this distinction of like being able to say family of origin and chosen family. Like, these are the people who have come along my path and have identified as people who I care enough, love enough, have built this relationship with, to consider them a part of my chosen family. Whereas, with my family of origin, these are people that I was born into and raised with, who I still love. Like, I have a very good relationship with my family that I was born into, like my mom and my sisters, and I don't want to like discredit them in that way, especially if they're listening. I love y'all. And I do think that in the queer sense, absolutely. But that's a good point too, of like, I definitely have people in my life who I call auntie this, auntie that, who are either really distant cousins or not family at all, but that's like how we show that sign of love and respect to them too, and considering them part of this family makeup. Yeah. So that's a good point to bring into it as well, which I don't think I've thought about in that way before.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like, the power in being able to choose who those folks are going to be versus the ones you're told have to be your family. Yeah. Yeah.
It's an active piece of being able to choose for yourself. Yeah. Okay, well, let's take a break there and we'll come back to finish it out, okay?
Alrighty.
All right. And we're back. So, we were just talking about effort that it takes to like maintain friendships. I would love for us to then talk a bit about what happens when conflict arises in those friendships and how do we navigate that.
So I'm thinking about Insecure. You ever watch that?
Of course.
So you know about the turmoil and complete emotional roller coaster that was Issa Rae and Molly's relationship, their friendship. And I think this question about how do we respond to conflict within friendships is really important. Like I was saying earlier, you know, I know people who look back on their really good friendships and say it ended and I don't even remember why, or I wish I would reach out or they would reach out to me, but no one's actually making that move. So it is a really good conversation, I think, to have when we're talking about maintaining and nurturing our friendships. So something that I want to kind of pull into the space is to understand from our perspective of when we're in this situation, what do we bring into the table? What harm have we caused? What struggles we may be presented with that can really serve as a barrier. So oftentimes it can be like pride or they messed up, so they should reach out first. You know, so I think some of that stuff really gets in the way with our friendships. Well, in general, actually.
Right. Yeah.
But for some reason, I think we struggle with mending and apologizing more in our friendships than I think like with our romantic relationships and families and stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that goes back to like that relationship hierarchy that people hold of like, well, this isn't like these other relationships, so I shouldn't have to
put all that effort in. The way or they should just know, like, this is my best friend, so she should have known that XYZ was going to be the outcome of this situation.
Yeah, definitely taking a lot for granted, for sure.
So I just finished reading this book. It's not about friendships, it's about relationships in general, but it's called Don't Cry for Me by Daniel. Why are you laughing?
Why do you think? I have a song in my head. Oh. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina.
But in this book, it is just full of regrets and I should haves and everything that I didn't say and that I did say that I shouldn't have said. And so since it's so fresh in my head, it was really a frustrating read because I'm just like, the truth is right there, or just the vulnerability is right there. Just say the thing, the longing and desire that the parents were having, the friendships, the partners, like just that lack of communication and transparency. So I think in these moments we can talk about all of the communication skills, using I statements, you know, but really I think it just comes down to ownership of what we're feeling and being able to say it, and ownership to whatever role that we played into the upset. Like, it's deeper than being the bigger person. It's being the loving, caring, compassionate person for us to navigate this conflict with, you know?
I love that. I love that piece of like, it's not just being the bigger person. And I think it speaks to, again, like choosing, right, to make the effort, choosing to see the value in this relationship and wanting to take the steps necessary to maintain it. Because if we don't, then that's when we do see those moments of like 5 years later, and this person who was one of my closest confidants is nowhere to be found.
Yeah. When you like are going through your phone or social media and you're like, I don't know anything about this person. I don't know what they're going through, good, bad, indifferent. Like, I'm just so out of the loop with this person's life. And it can feel so terrible, you know? And is that what we want? So I think if we're talking about navigating conflict to the point of repair and rekindling, that's one story. But if it's an end of a friendship because maybe something was so egregious that it's not repairable, or, people drift apart and they outgrow each other, and that happens, okay? So where are we regarding this conflict? Is it like we're done, or we want to repair this? So I think that's something to talk about too, but I think it's something to talk about, because I think even when we are ending relationships, it's still worth a conversation. It doesn't have to be ghosting and blocking everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I think we should be able to have an uncoupling, an unfriending conversation about what happened and why, and okay, I wish you well. I'm always rooting for you, friend, but from a distance.
Yeah.
But I think in our culture, we're just very quick to do that, to do the blocking and all this other stuff, instead of just having the conversation. Of course, especially when it is okay to have the conversation, it feels safe. Like, so if there's violence and stuff happening, then maybe, but a lot of times it's not that deep. And sometimes I'm like, at this big age, like, let's learn other skills.
I think that's a great point. It speaks to, honestly, our episode last week, right, with Dr. Lex, and talking about, going on contact. And I think for me, that piece of when that's our only tool in the toolbox, right?
Come on, bring it full circle.
Then it does cut us off from these relationships, right? And it doesn't allow us to see the complexities in them. It doesn't allow us to have these deeper conversations. If we're just jumping to, you're out of my life, this is it, at any drop of the hat, that's going to be difficult moving forward if that's the only way you know how to be in a relationship with other people. If you only choose that option as a way out.
And I'm also thinking about, what is the space to acknowledge how we can grow together in our friendships, especially like you were talking about friendships that you've had from a really young age.
Yeah.
So the type of things we will go through when we are in junior high, high school, even early college is not the same as now.
Yeah.
And the pains that we experience, the struggles that we experience, it's going to be different. And so recognizing that we are all growing and learning, and how does that also relate into understanding how we communicate and our emotional intelligence and all this other stuff, like just skills that we did not have, that we are trying to build now.
Yeah.
And how that relates to our friendship. I think that's also really important to recognize. So when someone doesn't do something well, it's like, let's not take it personally. Let's see what we need to do differently, or what skills I don't have or you don't have that we are trying to navigate here, instead of making this person the villain, who's just like inconsiderate and all this other stuff. And they can be, but maybe they grew up in that environment, and maybe at one point it worked for you, or maybe they've been like that with everyone, and now it's your turn to be on the receiving end, even though you thought it would never be. But when we, have these lived experiences and traumas or whatever, like, it's going to come out. And so I think we need to create space to recognize, like, oh, I've known this person since they were 11 years old or 21 years old, and we are completely different people. How do we continue growing together?
Yeah.
So conflicts and stuff may happen. And if I know my friend has always been a fighter and never talker, but now trying to change that behavior, then what grace can I extend to say, like, okay, we don't do that anymore. We don't block each other. We don't fight. We don't, talk shit behind your back to our other friend. Like, no, we're actually trying to learn to do this in a healthier way so we can stay connected. So I think when we're talking about managing conflict in our friendships, we have to think about all these other components that are likely influencing it.
Yeah. And I think another thing that comes to mind too is, like, within all that, like, how do we identify what boundaries, right, that are necessary within that relationship too, and how do we communicate that effectively so that we know how to show for each other, right? Like, if, again, right, like, I'm thinking if they do something that causes harm to you, but they might not have even known that that is a boundary that you have for them, and then you choose to cut them off, that takes away the opportunity to repair, that takes away the opportunity to establish that boundary and to let them know, like, hey, what you did, I'm not okay with. And, moving forward, I want you to be aware of that, because if this happens again, I will respond in this way, right? And being able to establish that ahead of the time so that we know, right? Like, it's like rules of engagement, I feel like boundaries are, right? Like, how do we let people know, like what I need, what they need, how places we can compromise to be able to have the best relationship possible.
Yeah. I really love that reminder because sometimes I think we get into this little game of testing people silently. You know, we have these expectations and we are just like not saying anything because we feel like they should know, or we just want to see how they respond. And it's like, if this is someone you care about and love, why wouldn't you want to set them up for the best outcome, even with yourself? So that's like, this is what I need, and this is how we can navigate tough times together, instead of me silently stacking the odds against you, you know. So yeah, being able to set boundaries and talk about how, you know, I think people first, it's hard because people are still learning their boundaries. You know, if you ask someone, how should someone love you? How do you know how to answer that question?
Oof.
Right? What do you need to feel, be loved, to feel and be seen, to be affirmed and validated? Like, we're not often thinking about it ahead of time. It's usually in the moment something happens and we're like, oh, that doesn't feel good, but is that a boundary or not? I'm not sure. Or am I responding in ways because that's just how I'm used to responding? So, you know, we have to give everyone grace, especially if we're recognizing that I'm still figuring out what I need. So, yeah.
So, are there any final thoughts that you might have for folks around the topic?
Yeah. I think to wrap up, I would just like to remind us that we get out what we put in, and that we can always hold ourselves up to doing better and being more insightful, to show up in the ways that we really want to. So with that, I encourage you all to do something bold this week. Go somewhere new and make a friend.
I love that. Yeah, I think for me, it goes back to like the relationship hierarchy and how it doesn't have to be that way. Like, inherently, platonic relationships can have as much or even more for some people value the romantic and familiar relationships. And so cherish them.
Cherish them.
Invest in them.
I would love for us to have deep value in all of our relationships.
Yeah.
You know, that we don't really lean heavily into our friendships because we're not getting something from our romantic relationship, or vice versa. Like, how can we be satisfied in all of our relationships and not put the weight on, like, okay, well, since this is my romantic partner and I've been taught that I'm not supposed to have emotional support from them, I'm going to get that from my friends. But people have been taught this. People do this. So, like, what would it mean to look into your parent relationship, your friendship, your partner, and know that all of these folks can hold space for my emotions? How can we get there?
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, listeners, we have come to an end. Thank you for being a friend to us. Yes. And we hope to hear from you soon. So join us next week as we talk about moving from homies to lover friends and the complexity in casual sex with friends. You can follow us at Soft Landing Podcast on Instagram and at healingexchange.com/podcast. Rate us and subscribe on Spotify and send us your questions. We want to hear from you.
And we also want to let you know that we are also on YouTube Music now.
Yes.
So check us out there too.